Before the kettle reaches a boil, he slides the cracked family photo face down on the supper table, lets a spoon clink against an empty bowl, turns as the clock's second hand drags through the thick air, and leaves the kitchen while the house waits for a reply that never comes. He pads barefoot down the hall, slippers folded under a chair by the doorway, and the smell of kettle steam curls past framed pictures, keeping the same distance it always has from the living room sofa. In the dining room, the table wears the same scatter of mail and folding napkins. The radio in the corner hums low with a midday weather report somebody always forgets to turn off. He takes the kettle off the burner, pours the hot water into a chipped mug with careful precision, and slides a thin slice of toast from the oven rack with tongs, setting it beside the sugar bowl his wife later rearranges without comment. From the hallway, he can hear the dishwasher's soft thrum settling back into idle, the ghost of breakfast still wet behind its door. He walks past the worn couch, taps the TV remote twice to nap on the stand, and folds his hands around the warm mug. The air is still, the same old rhythm of timers and slow footsteps. And somewhere beyond the closed door, a laundry basket bulges with the day's colors, waiting for the next quiet turn of the dial. From the hallway, the parents' footsteps are bare and soft, the way someone moves around a sleeping house. They carry the casserole dish back to the kitchen, set it down without a word, and then pick up the plate stacked beside it. The spouse glances up from the living room couch, a mug warming their hands, and lifts their eyebrows. "Long day?" they ask, masking the thread of concern in the pitch with a laugh. The parent shakes their head once, a quick shrug that doesn't invite more. "Just need the guest room," they say, turning toward the stairwell. They slide past without making eye contact, hands wrapped around the plate, and the spouse catches only a flash of their back as the door closes. The hallway light hums on, but a shadow presses tight against the walls where the parent lingers for a second before stepping into the guest room's dim light. Minutes later, the spouse finds a wooden tray of teacups and a knit blanket near the doorway. They pad to the door, palms resting on the frame, and call softly, "You want a cup? I can set it down." "I'm fine." The parent's voice comes through from the other side, low and even, fingers tapping the edge of the desk inside. They keep the door cracked just enough for a sliver of lamplight to leak out. The spouse leans against the jamb, thumb brushing the wood, watching the thin line of light tremble as the parent paces once and stops at the window. "You've been on your feet all week," the spouse adds. "I was thinking we could get the kids to the park tomorrow." "Maybe later." The parent's gaze settles on something beyond the glass. They turn away before the spouse can see their face. The words land quietly, but in the pause that follows, the air thickens. Tension drums between them as the spouse watches the parent fold a blanket over a stack of papers, hands moving slowly, deliberately avoiding their eyes. "Okay," the spouse says, voice softening. "I'll leave the tea here. No rush." They set the tray gently on the floor outside the door and slide the blanket a fraction closer, a gesture showing they're not giving up, but also not pushing. The parent doesn't respond. They only exhale once, a breath trembling in the narrow gap before closing the door farther until just a sliver remains. The spouse steps back, fingertips tracing the doorframe grain before turning away. They walk back down the hallway, pausing to retrieve a folded grocery list from the kitchen counter, then place it on the dining table beside their mug. The living room lamp flicks on, casting long warmth across the carpet. The tension eases a notch as they sink into the couch, curling their legs beneath them and taking a sip from the still warm mug. A quiet release settling over the scene. Beyond the door, the parent sinks onto the edge of the guest room bed, the blanket drawn tight around their knees. They trace the corner of the tray with a finger, then slide their palm over a notebook, keeping the lights low. Outside, the house settles into hush, But the distance remains. A careful, deliberate withdrawal wrapped tight around the parents' silence. The guest room light spills a narrow rectangle across the bedspread. The parent sits on the edge, shoulders hunched over a clenched fist dragging at the cotton cover. Fingers leave faint white crescents in the fabric. The other hand pats the pillow as if trying to shape away the weight of what's been left unspoken. A single tear rolls down and disappears into the seam, leaving a dark, damp track. Every breath comes through the nose in a sharp, controlled inhale, then a shuddering exhale that does nothing to ease the quiet. On the couch, the spouse leans forward, palms resting on the cushion. The teacup has gone cold. Steam used to curl upward, but now the surface reflects the repeat of a face. The spouse pushes up, dusts their fingertips over the armrest, and stands. The grocery list still lies on the coffee table, unchecked. With slow steps, the spouse crosses to the door and lifts a hand to knock. 3 soft taps, then a pause. The door stays half closed, the crack showing a sliver of the parent's eyes, glossy and unfocused. Somewhere beyond that slit, silence drapes thick as velvet. "Can I come in?" the spouse asks, voice low enough not to startle but loud enough to break the hush. The parent's hand trembles on the knob. Just for a minute. The door doesn't move. The parent presses back, pinches the pillow lid so tight it leaves a crease, and the creak of the bed frame is the only answer. "Maybe I should leave," the spouse continues, stepping back, hands already halfway to the handle. Their voice cuts when the parent's lips part slightly, the same tremor running down both arms. If the spouse could name what hangs there, it would be the thing that makes the chest tighten, a sentence that stops before it ever forms. They hesitate, feel the pull to coax, to press this open slit wider. But the parent's shoulders go even higher when they draw their knees in, and the door groans against the floor as a shove of silence. The spouse lowers their hand, slides a folded napkin onto the small table by the door, and writes 3 quick words on the back of the grocery list. "I'm right here." The simple stroke of the pen is a tiny act, but it's something to leave behind instead of just standing in the doorway. The parent doesn't reach. Their head tilts down. The spouse watches the tear drop from the cheek, hit the cover, and the cloth flares darker for a second before the moisture soaks in. "I'll check back in 20, the spouse says, voice steady. "No pressure, I'm not going anywhere." The parent doesn't answer. A muffled, ragged breath slides through the crack in the door. The spouse walks back to the couch and settles, keeping the bowl of tea untouched but within arm's reach. A cough, a shift of feet on the rug, a small release of the held-in chest. The room feels weighty, but the note on the table acts like an anchor. Out in the hallway, the lights stay dim. The parent presses their forehead against the door frame, letting the faint hallway glow wash over their flushed face. And the silence between them thickens into something almost tangible. Still, the spouse keeps their body relaxed, hands folded in the lap, eyes on the door. The small movement of the parent's fingers on the pillow is all the information the spouse has, and they let it sit there, unresolved but acknowledged. The moment is taut, and for now, that is enough. The tea sits untouched in its mug, a ring starting to bloom on the coffee table while the children press pencils into math worksheets. Even the crayon beside the homework looks cautious. Mara keeps glancing up, then back down as if the walls might split open if she looks too long. "Can he at least tell us what's for dinner?" Lucas whispers to Mara, not even bothering to raise his voice. The sentence floats in the room and no one answers. A door thuds open down the hall, and the parent steps out for the first time since retreating, shoulders hunched as though daylight is a weight. No one rises. The parent flings a hand toward the hallway closet, and a framed photo wobbles on the wall. "I don't want to be watched," they bark before clamping the door shut behind, leaving it slightly ajar. The hallway light flickers because the switch had been slammed. The parent stands blinking at the empty space, fists unclenching, then balling again, before marching past the living room and straight back into the guest room. The door slams this time, sound sharp, echoing through the house like a warning. "Mom?" Mara tries softly, hovering near the doorway, now blocked by the closing door. "Do you need anything? We can—" "Go do your homework," the parent snaps from behind the wood, breath loud enough to catch them both. This time there is a pause. No answer, only the thin sound of the parent drawing a deep breath. For a second the quiet holds like a held-back tide. Then the parent grunts, "Go back," and the word slams into Lucas more than the door ever could. He stands, shoulders tense, and retreats with Mara, their shoulders brushing in a brief, automatic comfort. The parent's hand appears again, this time through the gap, slamming the door open just enough to drop a folded note on the floor. 2 lines, words written in hurried block letters. "I'm here, but not ready." The parent leans against the doorframe, teeth clenched, pupils darting past the living room toward the children, then away. After a beat, the hand flushes the door shut, leaving the note on the carpet. Mara picks it up, traces the words, then slips it toward the hallway with her palm, while Lucas hurries to warm the kettle for tea. Something the parent didn't want to share. Yet the heat trails close enough to comfort anyone passing the hall. The reward comes in the small release. Mara slides the note under the crack, and for a heartbeat they can feel that the parent might read it. The parent doesn't respond, but there is movement. Slow, deliberate breath, a hand rubbing the armrest of the chair. No words are exchanged, yet the house shifts. The children understand the distance, the spouse respects the boundary, and the parent remains in withdrawal. The coldness lingers, but now it carries the weight of a decision made and maintained, not an accident of silence. The timeline moves forward with the decision to let the parent be alone for now, but to keep watching, to keep the tea warm and the door ajar for the next small crack of light. The living room hums with the sound of crayons scratching across paper. Mara kneels beside the coffee table, spreading puzzle pieces into neat rows, while Eli sits cross-legged on the rug and whispers the colors out loud. The tea on the side table steams in vain. Jacob keeps glancing toward the guest room door from his spot on the couch, arms folded around his mug-like armor. He doesn't move when the hallway light flickers. Instead, he lets the silence sit between the combats of toy guns and the muffled scrape of something against the guest room floor. On the other side of the door, the parent crouches on the thin runner, a cheap spiral notebook opened on their knees. The sentence, "I have to tell you," looms on the top line in 3 uneven strokes. A pencil hovers over the next word, shaking, then drops to the page with a soft thud. Hands clamp down on the edge of the paper, knuckles white, shoulders roll against the door frame, pressing forehead to the wood as if the cool paint can steady whatever shakes inside. They slide the notebook toward the dark gap beneath the door. But before it can disappear, they yank it back, fold the page inward, and tuck the whole thing under the mattress instead. Jacob finally stands, muscles tight enough that the couch springs squeal. He carries the thermos of soup past the hallway, sets it on the small table where the children have stacked their homework, and pulls the blanket taut over Mara's knees. "Dinner's in 10, he says, voice clipped, eyes avoiding the door. "We'll do a quick read before bed." The kids nod, sensing the change in his cadence. The sentences are shorter, the smile smaller. When they're busy again, Jacob returns to the couch, but not to the center of the room. He curls at one end and keeps the tea on the tray, untouched, yet within reach, like a promise he isn't ready to cash yet. A floorboard creaks from the guest room. The door is still mostly closed, but it opens an inch when the parent slides their shoulder against the jamb. A sliver of face peers out, pale in the hallway light, eyes darting toward the waiting kids and the distant couch. "Just give us space," the parent murmurs through the crack, voice barely there. Jacob doesn't answer, but his hands tighten on the cushion. Mara looks up, puzzled, then glances back at Jacob, who gestures sideways with a flat palm. "Go play." There is a breath that holds in the hallway, the tiniest exhale from the parent. Then the door shuts the rest of the way. Silence crashes for a moment, and Jacob lets it hang before he says, softer than before, "Night, kids. I'll be downstairs." He doesn't move toward the guest room. Instead, he kneels, tucks Mara beneath the blanket, and presses a kiss to Eli's forehead, the contact quick but real. The children settle, and Jacob lets out a breath without looking back, keeping distance but still steady enough for the small ones to see him there. Mara runs the kettle again, while Jacob shepherds the children through morning routines that now feel like a relay race without a baton pass. The coffee maker gurgles beside a pile of backpacks that didn't get packed last night because the parent didn't come out long enough to help. Mara lifts a lunchbox, rubs jam from her thumb, and calls up the hall. "Can you sign Mara's permission slip?" The guest room door stays shut. Silence answers. She slides a marker under the door, taps the wood twice, and the parent's hand snatches it back. A line of words appears through the crack. "Not ready." Mara lowers the marker, but doesn't respond. She drops the completed form on the counter, but the top part where the parent signs says, "Pending." Mara exchanges a look with Jacob. He nods his jaw tight, carries the bag of trash past the guest room, making sure not to meet the door frame. The children trail behind, slow steps, trying not to disturb the tension hanging in the hallway. "Mommy," the youngest whispers. "Where's Dad?" Mara gives a quick smile, squeezing their shoulder. "He's in the library doing his quiet work. We'll grab an apple anyway." She hustles them toward the kitchen table and spreads out math worksheets. No one mentions the missed breakfast, the dishes piling in the sink, or the parent's silence. The small victories, homework finished, lunches packed, have become the only payoff for the day. Later, Mara retreats to the back porch, phone pressed to her ear with a friend from work. She keeps her voice low. "I just needed to say something not about the house for 5 minutes." She moves along the railing, letting the autumn light warm her face, then steps back inside and leaves the door cracked open. The porch becomes her sanctuary, a small, contained moment of humanity that doesn't touch the parent's boundary. When she returns, the parent is in the hallway holding a laundry basket, but the clothes are untouched. The parent merely standing there, shoulders rigid. "Those things need folding," Mara says, and the parent glances at the basket without moving. "I know," they murmur. I'm not doing anything right now." The tension surges. Jacob on the couch lifts his head. "We're handling dinner if you want to stay in here," he says, voice even but sharp. The parent huffs, slams the basket back onto the floor, and shuffles toward the guest room. "I said I'm not ready," they shout over their shoulder. The door snapping closed behind them. Mara leans back against the counter, breath coming fast, then smooths her hands down her apron. "Okay," she tells the kids. "We'll eat plain chicken tonight. Jacob, can you finish the slides for the school meeting?" They both nod. Mara takes a deep breath, sets her phone on the table, then reopens the back door and steps outside again. Not to escape, but to make a small space for herself, away from the tension. Inside, Jacob starts the rice cooker, a steady rhythm of something being completed while the parents' isolation drags on upstairs. The small, quiet rewards. Dinner sorted, homework finished, Mara carving out one small, separate moment, are real, even as the distance stays the same. Mara carries a paper bag, balancing it against the hallway wall with one hip so her hands stay free. The guest room door is almost shut to the frame. Light leaks through a crack. She sets the bag down, slides a mason jar of soup and a note that says, "For when you're ready to eat," beneath the door, then steps back a pace. Her fingers drum once on the banister, then retreat to the wall, keeping herself upright. The door creaks open an inch. A pale face appears, eyes sharp under the skull. "I said leave it," the parent hisses, voice barely louder than breath. The door slams without another second, hard enough to rattle the family pictures in the hall. Mara exhales through her nose, wipes the back of her hand across her forehead, and turns away, the bag still on the floor, untouched. Jacob appears at the end of the hall with two backpacks slung over one shoulder. "Kids," he calls, "shoes on. We'll be 10 minutes late, but we can grab a coffee after." He drags the kids' sneakers from the bench, hooks them together with a practiced fling. The children shuffle out from the living room, eyes down, steps uncertain. As Jacob crouches to double knot a lace, the parent raps on the door from inside, each pound echoing like a dropped plate. "Don't let them near it," Jacob says without looking up. He slides a backpack toward Mara. "I'm heading out. Your shift?" Mara hesitates with the bag. The soup container rattles against the floor. "They're hungry. I'm not letting them go to school on empty stomachs." Jacob stands, shoulders high. "There's nothing more we can do there," he replies, voice low. "You've been in the hallway 10 times today. We need the kids fed, the car refueled." The parent knocks again, louder, punching air with the words, "Leave me alone. You made your choice. Don't expect me to come running." Mara's fingers tighten on the bag. Jacob doesn't move toward the door. Instead, he points to the living room. "Let them draw at the table. I'm picking up the prescriptions on the way." Mara nods, shoulders sharp, the tension cracking the air. She hefts the bag and pushes past Jacob, his path into the guest room blocked by his own resolve. She slides the soup into the kitchen, spreads paper across the table, pulls out crayons. "Draw their own story," she says to the kids, her voice even but brittle. Mara doesn't look back toward the hall. The children press the crayons to the paper, each stroke a bright line in the quiet. The clatter of plastic cups becomes a little chorus. Jacob opens the hallway door, pauses, breathes in the heavy stillness. "I'll text when I'm back," he says, already turning toward the stairs. His footsteps fade. Mara stays at the table, watching the kids color, the faint hum of crayons scraping paper a small payoff amid the silence. The parent does not reappear. The door remains shut, the claim for solitude unbroken. A final knock comes before Jacob runs out. The parent's hand against wood, not loud, just steady. "I'm here," it says. Mara doesn't answer. The kids keep drawing, their tiny hands moving again and again, adding bright swirls that do not connect the broken hallway with the closed door, but keep the room moving forward. The room hums with the rustle of paper and distant rain. Mara's hands busy guiding small pencils while Jacob watches from the couch. His body still angled away, though his eyes keep drifting toward the cotton door. The tea sits cold on the table, untouched. A promise of calm he cannot quite keep. In the narrow hall, The guest room door breathes, a thin seam aglow where a single lamp spills hesitantly. The parent's shoulders press against the frame. A damp line of regret darkens the collarbone. A note, pale on the hardwood, declares presence without words, slid back into the room by a careful hand. The children draw a house beside a tree, a sun split down the middle. And when Mara lifts her head, she meets Jacob's gaze and lets a small, tired smile settle between them. The door closes again with a sound like a heartbeat being held. And silence, heavy and familiar, settles over the waiting room. No confession, no repair. Only the space between, now forever scaffolded by the choices left unspoken.